Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Economic Minute. I'm your host, Caitlin Butler. Today, we'll be talking about a hot topic, particularly in urban areas, called gentrification. Throughout the show, we will be talking with an expert in gentrification, J.C. Bernhardt, and two economists, Chris Cortez and Charles Isiche. And then our own Daniel Jock will take to the streets to ask inhabitants how they feel about the topic. So what is gentrification? Gentrification is the displacement of existing communities by wealthier newcomers, usually young white professionals. So JC, thanks for being with us today. Can you tell us how gentrification occurs?
Well, Caitlin, you've already kind of outlined how gentrification occurs in a more passive form, in which these new young professionals are searching for lower rent rates, so they move to the inner city areas. But there's a more active approach that was proposed by Neil Smith in 1979. It's more of a social restructuring. The landowners notice the gap in rent that they're earning now compared to what they can be earning if they put their land to best use. So then the landowners and investors will pour money into their accommodations, raising rent, mortgages, and leasing rates. This pushes the original owners out because they can't afford to pay. And this allows for new young professionals who have more money to move closer to their jobs.
Okay, so if we looked at this as a graph of supply and demand, we would see the original inhabitants demand curve, D1, and the housing supply curve, S. But with the influx of the young professionals, we see the demand curve shift up and to the right to D2. Landlords notice this increase in demand for housing and therefore set the rent at the new higher equilibrium price. This higher rent makes it difficult for original tenants to continue living there.
Exactly, but it's not just the cost of rent. New, more upscale businesses follow the money, which raises the general cost of living altogether.
So now that we've heard from JC, our expert in gentrification, we'll be talking with Chris and Charles, two economists, about their opinions on gentrification and how it affects the economy. So Chris, how do you feel about gentrification?
Well, I think it's a good thing. Life improves for the residents that live in that area.
So you're saying that their standard of living actually increases? Can you explain how this happens?
Well, it's because landlords see an influx of wealthier tenants. They are willing to invest in their properties so that they can raise their rent. This also serves to increase the visual appeal of the area. Also, the general change in occupying demographic causes a decrease in crime rates in the area.
Okay. So how does this affect local businesses?
Well, not only do local businesses see an influx of new customers who are willing to spend more, but this gives an opportunity for new entrepreneurs to start their own local businesses to accommodate the new consumer base. Even local government benefits from gentrification. More residents with higher wages mean a substantial increase in tax revenue, decreasing the burden of upkeep for public services in the area.
Thanks, Chris. So now, Charles, tell us your opinions on gentrification.
Well, although there's a positive side to gentrification in terms of the effects on the economy, there's also a negative side on the local residents of the populace being gentrified.
So what exactly does gentrification do to these current residents?
Well, due to the gentrification, there's usually a spike in rent prices, which leads to evictions of these local residents out of their homes and apartments.
So how does this lead the original residents to feel about the people causing gentrification?
Well, the locals usually hold huge resentment towards the newcomers, and this often leads to destruction, protests, and violence against these new residents.
Wow, I can see why this topic is pretty hotly debated. Great opinions from two great economists, Chris and Charles. Thanks again for being with us today. So now I'm going to turn it over to Daniel Jock as he goes to talk with people in some of the areas with the most rapid gentrification and get their opinions on how it is affecting their communities. Daniel is sure to liven things up, so here is Daniel Jock with the Economic Minute.
Thanks, Caitlin. I'm Daniel Jock, and today on the Economic Minute, we're traveling around the country talking to people in large cities to find out their perspective on gentrification. Today, we're going to visit the cities of Washington, D.C., Dallas, Texas, and Memphis, Tennessee. We're in Washington, D.C., and we're going to ask someone what they think about gentrification. Ma'am, can I get your attention for a second? Ma'am, can you tell us who you are and what you think about gentrification in your city?
My name is Peyton, and I've lived in Washington, D.C. my whole life. I think gentrification is usually viewed as bad. However, being that I'm a small business owner, I really like all the economic growth I've seen in the last 10 years. It seems like every day more and more new customers are showing up. I mean, yeah, my rent on my apartment has skyrocketed, but the standard of living has increased so much that it definitely makes up for it.
Thank you for your time, ma'am. Now we're in Memphis, Tennessee. Sir, could you help us for a second? Sir, we want to know your name and what you think about gentrification. Why, yes, sirree, I sure can tell you about gentrification. My name is Billy Dan, and I think gentrification is pretty bad. A few years back, it drove me and my wife out of the city. We couldn't afford to pay rent or even shop around town. It drove the prices up so high. Now we're staying down on my buddy Bubba's ranch and helping tend the cows. My wife stays inside and doing the dishes. I don't know what we're going to do now. Why, thank you so much, Billy Dan. Now back to you, Caitlin.
Wow, lots of diverse opinions from people in diverse areas of the country. Well, everyone, thanks so much for tuning in to this episode of the Economic Minute. As we discussed gentrification, the causes, pros and cons, and how people in the areas with the most rapid gentrification feel about the topic. Tune in next time for the Economic Minute.